Today, I am giving you a full course on how to use ChatGPT in 2024 for writing. We'll cover some of the basics before diving into more intermediate and advanced techniques. This is literally everything that I know about ChatGPT for writing in one single video. Here's a brief look at everything that we're going to be covering in this video. As you can see, we're going to be going through a lot, but there will be timestamps, so you can easily jump ahead to the section that you want to cover specifically. And then in the future, if you want to revisit this video to cover a different section, you can absolutely do that. My name is Jason. I am the author of 14 books and counting. I write literally every day, and AI has become a major part of my writing process for me. A lot of people don't understand that AI doesn't mean you just push a button and out pops a article or a essay or a book. It's much more of a collaborative process that makes AI more of a productivity tool to sort of enhance you as the author rather than a replacement for that writing. In addition to being the author of 14 books so far, I worked for a company called Kindlepreneur for 3 years. Kindlepreneur is one of the largest websites about helping authors write books and then self-publish and market them. So I spent that time helping a lot of authors learn how to write their books and literally teaching people how to do this sort of thing that we're going to be talking about. And since then, I am now full-time on this YouTube channel, The Nerdy Novelist, helping authors utilize tools like AI and other productivity enhancing tools into their writing. And it is currently the largest YouTube channel for AI writing in particular. We cover a lot of things, not just the utilization of the tool, but what actually makes good writing. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the OG AI writing tool. It is the tool that basically put AI on the map for a lot of different people. It launched in November of 2022 and basically exploded to millions of users within a few weeks and kicked off the AI craze, I guess you could call it, that has happened since then. And while there are other tools that have equaled or even in some cases surpassed the capabilities of ChatGPT, I'll have more to say about that at the end of this video. I have no doubt that future iterations of ChatGPT, for instance, when we get the mythical GPT-5, that we are all going to be blown away from that as we were with the original ChatGPT in 2022. But as I'm recording this video, GPT-5 is not out yet. And so to prepare for that, here is everything that you need to know to master ChatGPT for your writing. First, let's start with the basics. And the very first thing you should know is how to even set up a ChatGPT account. Now, as of recently, they have actually changed it so you don't technically need to have a ChatGPT account. All you need to do is go to chat.openai.com, as you can see right here in my browser window, and it will open a window very similar to this. And this tool has the ability to send messages and questions, and it will answer you here. But this is a very severely limited version of ChatGPT. And so if you want something with a little more capability, we're going to go ahead down here and say sign up. Once you get to the sign up page, you can go ahead and enter your email address and just walk through the steps. You don't necessarily have to set up a paid account to use ChatGPT, but as we'll get into in a little bit, there are restrictions around the free accounts, so there's not much you're going to be able to do there, but I'll get into that in just a second. Once you are in, and if you have a paid account, it'll look something like this. If you don't have a paid account, it will look very similar, but you might see that it will just say ChatGPT 3.5 over here, but this is the basics of setting up your account. The other thing to be aware of is that ChatGPT actually has a ChatGPT app, which you can download and use for free. And if you're using a paid account, it integrates with the app seamlessly as well. Pretty much all of the functionalities that you will find in the web browser version of ChatGPT are also found inside of the app, including image generation and image recognition. And it even has some text-to-speech capability, so it can actually read you the answer that it gives you. Additionally, there is a button here where you can press it and dictate into ChatGPT, so you don't even have to type out your questions, you can just voice them and it will give you the answer. So it's a very handy app to have. Okay, so now that we are in ChatGPT on the desktop version, let's go ahead and do just a quick exploration of everything that ChatGPT has to offer, with more details to come later in the video. Over here on the left, you have a history of all of your different chats. So if you want to revisit chats that you've had and maybe continue on that conversation, you can go ahead and find the chat here and then just continue on. And then you'll have more and more. You can delete these if you want, or you can just leave them there. You might also see a Explore GPTs button here, and we'll get into GPTs here in a second, but these are some powerful additional tools that you can use in your writing process. Up here at the top left is where you start a new chat. And then here, if you're using a paid version, gives you the option to access DALL-E 3 and a GPT-4 and lots of other tools inside of this GPT-4 here. But if you're on the free version, it'll just say GPT 3.5. Down here is where you actually enter your prompts. And they even give you a couple of sample prompts that you can try, but generally in practice, I don't use these very often. Down here at the bottom left, you'll see different ways to customize your account. You can view any GPTs that you've made. You can look at your plan, your payment plan. You can customize ChatGPT, and you can access settings. If we go to settings, there are a number of things that you can access and turn on here. For instance, you can switch this from a dark to light mode. Over here in speech, you can change the different speech voice that it's using when it talks to you, if you have that turned on. And there are a number of other things that you can play around with for specific results that you might have. So let's talk a little bit about the two different models that you can access inside of ChatGPT. Now, you might be unaware of this, but there are actually a lot more than two models that OpenAI has created for ChatGPT and other purposes. But most of them fall under two categories. We have ChatGPT 3.5 and we have ChatGPT 4. Accessible here is GPT 3.5 and GPT 4. GPT 3.5 is the first model that came out back when ChatGPT was first released, and then a few months later we were given GPT 4, which was a more powerful version of the model. Generally speaking, I stick with GPT-4 whenever I can if I'm using ChatGPT because overall it does tend to do better. However, GPT 3.5 is okay at some things and it is a lot faster. So for instance, if I want to summarize a document into a few sentences, that is something that GPT 3.5 is very good at, and I don't necessarily need the huge processing power that GPT-4 gives me, so I might use GPT 3.5 for that. You can use GPT-5 for any of the prompts that I'll be showing you in this video, but understand that they are not going to work as well with 3.5 on the whole when compared to GPT-4. GPT-4 just in general in terms of processing power, in terms of logic and math and reasoning, to a certain extent in terms of the actual quality of the writing, you're generally going to get better results out of GPT-4 than GPT 3.5. So what are the advantages of 3.5? Well, first of all, you can access 3.5 for free using your free account. You have to pay $20 a month for the GPT-4 version. And as I already mentioned, GPT 3.5 is also a lot faster and can be useful for certain specific use cases that it's really good at.
Hey guys, Jason from the future here. Now, since I initially recorded this video, there has been one little update that I wanted to insert into this video to talk about. In the short time since I recorded the video and started editing the video, there has been a new model released by OpenAI called GPT-4o. And now here, if you're looking in your ChatGPT dashboard, you'll see it'll say GPT-4o right here. This is not GPT-5, but it is a slightly more advanced model than the GPT-4, and it's now the one I would recommend most people use by default. Additionally, if you're using the free version of ChatGPT, this is the version that you will get. And so now there have been some pretty big changes over what happens in the free version of ChatGPT. If you have the free version of ChatGPT, you now have access to everything that you see here with GPT-4o. The only major difference is that you don't get as much of the usage of GPT-4o. You get up to 5 times more if you pay for it, and the output that it gives you will be a lot faster if you're paying for it. So those are just a few quick updates about that. Additionally, some interesting things about GPT-4o is that it has better image and speech recognition, but those all kind of come inside of the app, and not all of those features have been rolled out yet. One of the other things that we were promised with this announcement is that there would be a desktop app that you can download onto your computer and then use GPT natively inside of that desktop app, which will allow you to do things things like actually speak back and forth with the AI, very similar to talking to like a Jarvis or something like that. Additionally, with this update, there were a few small changes to the user interface. So a lot of your account access that used to be down here is now up here in the top corner. So you can access your GPTs, customize ChatGPT, access your settings all from here. But other than that, there hasn't been that much of a change. Everything that I talk about for the rest of this video, where I get into prompting techniques and into the use cases of AI, all of that is still relevant. Just understand that there is a slightly more advanced model out here that you can use that'll make it even better than how I demonstrated in the video. So with that, let's go on and continue with the rest of the video.
So if we go to ChatGPT's own website, this is what they have to say about the free and the paid plans. The free gives you unlimited messages using the 3.5 model, and you can access via the web browser or the app that's on your iPhone or Android devices. If you get ChatGPT Plus, it costs $20 a month per user billed monthly. They don't have an annual plan. It gives you access to GPT-4, the most capable model that they have currently, and presumably any future capable models that they have, like GPT-5, will be included in here. You'll also be able to browse and create and use GPTs, which is something I'll get into a little bit later, but they are a powerful time saver. And there are a bunch of features that come with the Plus plan, including probably most notably DALL-E. So DALL-E is an image generating tool to create images using AI. You also have access to web browsing. So if you want, you can get the AI to access the web to give you its answers. And this is a way of giving you more up-to-date answers. For instance, like who won the Super Bowl this year, it would be able to find that out by searching the web to do it. It also gives you access to advanced data analysis, which is a really cool sort of set of tools for, as the name implies, data analysis. It's less important for writing, but does kind of increase the overall power and raw horsepower that GPT can provide you. Those are the two main plans that you are likely to use. If you have a larger team, you might consider the team version, which is $25 per user per month, and that is billed annually. It gives you a little bit more GPT in terms of message caps, because even on the Plus plan, if you're using GPT-4 too much, you will eventually run into a barrier where they'll start throttling you. So if you run into that a lot, then you might want to consider the team plan, which is, if it's just you, it would be just $25 a month or $30 billed monthly. But if you have a team of people that are all needing to use the same account, this is the one you would want to use. One of the nice things about this and the enterprise versions is that your data is automatically excluded from training by default. So if you're concerned about using your data and having it actually be used in the GPT for training purposes, then this is something you might want to look at. This is particularly useful if you work with sensitive information. I know of some companies out there that don't allow their users to use ChatGPT, not because they're opposed to it, but because there is a non-zero chance that some of that data, if they're working with sensitive data for clients, for example, birthdays, social security numbers, or what have you, there is a non-zero chance that that will be sucked up by the GPT and then spit out later for someone else, and it could be a security risk. So if you're using the team plan, you can basically rest easy, at least as easy as it's possible to at this point, that won't happen. The same is true for the enterprise plan. There is no pricing for the enterprise plan. You just have to reach out to them directly, and it's basically, larger everything that we just talked about for the enterprise plan. So that's the basic differences between all of the different pricing plans. Again, I would either recommend the free or the Plus plan. The Plus plan, I think, gives you the most value, and for the average person is all you would need to have. Let's talk about multimodality. When I say the word multimodality, some of your eyes might glaze over, but what this basically means is it is capable of doing more than just text chat. So for instance, right here, I can attach different files. So I could attach PDFs or documents, text files, and even images, and the AI is capable of reading or visualizing those things. Additionally, because it can produce images, it is also capable of producing an image for you to look at. I'll demonstrate this more in a later part of the video. Additionally, ChatGPT is capable of not just generating text, but also generating audio. So you can listen to it. And particularly if you're using the app, you can speak into it and it's able to interpret your audio and understand it. So what can you actually use the AI inside of ChatGPT for? Well, there are a lot of things that you could do. The most common is to treat it like a junior assistant, someone that's there to sort of help you with the more monotonous parts of your job that you don't necessarily want to do, or that you would be better served working on something that's more at your higher level and letting someone else take care of the drudge work. But it is also capable of helping with pretty much all types of writing. No matter what you write, it can probably help in that thing. It's capable of acting as a coding assistant. So if you write code, you can use it for that. You can use it to analyze spreadsheet data, which is a fun one. And additionally, you can use it for art generation, and you can even use it as sort of a teaching guide. You can ask it to assume the role of a mentor in a specific field and ask you questions to help you get to the bottom of a topic a little bit better. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg. So let's go ahead and add a prompt here. What are all of the different things that you can help me with? And we let that prompt go. And it actually gave us a pretty solid list of all of the things that ChatGPT can help with. So informational queries are often used. Now, you do have to be careful that it's not hallucinating anything, but that is becoming less and less of an issue over time. So we have historical facts, scientific concepts, descriptions of places, people, and cultural phenomena. You can get practical guidance like recipes and cooking tips and fitness and health advice, language learning, mathematical problems, study tips. You can get technical assistance, so software troubleshooting, programming, explanation of engineering, creative projects like writing assistance, artistic advice, music theory and composition tips, entertainment and leisure like book and movie recommendations, which I think is going to be the future of how books and movies are discovered. It's going to be through our artificial intelligence, because an artificial intelligence can actually better understand the similarities between art forms to the point where if you like one thing, it is likely to give you a good recommendation of something else you might like. So that's a cool thing. Daily tasks and organization that can help you with schedule management, with event planning, budgeting. It can help you with news summaries, and summarizing really great research topics and data analysis. You can even get emotional and social support to a certain extent, as well as pretty much anything that you can think of. You can probably use AI and ChatGPT to help with those things. So let's walk through a basic typical prompt that you might use AI for. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to write a book about food addiction. Okay, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So let's just say, give me a list of ideas for chapters that I might find in a book on food addiction. From there, it gives us a list of different options. And I might already have an idea of what I want to write inside of this book, but as it gives me all of these ideas, I may discover like, oh, I hadn't thought about that particular thing. For instance, maybe I wasn't planning on writing about the food industry. I was just going to talk about the science of the brain in food addiction. But maybe it's a good idea to talk about the role in food industry, whatever it is. You can then either do a couple of different things. Down here at the bottom, you can have it read this aloud. You can copy this prompt. So if you want to take it and paste it into a document, it's easy to do that. You can regenerate it. You can tell it that it was a bad response. So that actually is a way of training the AI to get better. So if it gives you a bad response, you can label it as a bad response. And over time, as more and more people do this, it'll actually help the AI get better. And you can even change the model from 4 to 3.5. That's assuming you're using the paid model, which I am. So let's just say I didn't like this and I just wanted to hit regenerate. So if I hit regenerate, it will go ahead and start over again, and the answer will be slightly different. But let's say like, oh, I didn't mean to press that, or there actually was something in the first response that you really liked. So once it is done actually writing this response out, you'll notice there is a 2 of 2 here. All you have to do is go to the first one here with these little arrows, and you can find the original responses. You can also label whether this response is better, worse, or the same. And this, again, is one of those little signals that is helping to train the AI. So if it was better, you would label it as better, and it would know, okay, this is a better response. And over time, that adds up to helping the AI make much better decisions. So that is a typical prompt. You could then follow up with more prompts about this, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. But let's say item 12 here, personal stories, real life accounts of people who have battled and overcome food addiction. I could say something like, can you give me examples of what to look for with number 12? And I don't even need to say personal stories, real life accounts, because by saying the number 12, it will realize based on its context which one I'm talking about. So if I go ahead and say go on that, it automatically knows right here, personal stories, right? And so here are some examples of what to look for when gathering these stories. And it gives me now a list of things to look for. So following up, digging deeper is a technique we'll get into more later in this video, but it's a powerful way to get the most out of AI. All right, now let's talk about token limits. A token limit is basically how much can the AI remember and output at the same time. ChatGPT does not make it super clear what these token limits are because it depends on the model that we're using. And you'll recall, even though I say there are 3.5 and 4, there's only 2 models here, there are actually subtle differences between different models within those categories. So GPT-4, there have actually been several different versions of GPT-4. And one of the things that changes with some of those versions is its token limit. So for instance, there are versions of GPT-4 that have 125,000 token limit. All that means is that it is able to remember quite a lot of words, almost 100,000 words in that case. A token is not the same as a word. A token can be just a word, but it can also be a part of a word, almost like a syllable. But the way the AI interprets it is a little different than just syllables. It's not quite that black and white, but you can think of it as a machine learning version of a syllable, meaning part of a word. And so 100,000 tokens is roughly equivalent to 75,000 words, but that is an approximation. It can be give or take. Most of the newer AI models out there have quite a few token limits. Other models like Claude 3 have 200,000 token limits. That means it can read a document up to roughly 150,000 words. And again, it doesn't appear that OpenAI makes the information super public about what token limit they have inside of ChatGPT. Even though we know we're using GPT-4, the question is which version of GPT-4. And there appears to be some evidence that they alternate sometimes, that they're using one instead of another, and they sort of quietly incorporate them or test different ones here and there. If you want to be more exact about the token limits, then you could visit the OpenAI playground where you're able to pick the exact model that you want to use. But with ChatGPT, just understand that you might not have the token limit that you might want. The other thing that is important to keep in mind with token limits is how much is it going to be able to handle. If I put a whole book into ChatGPT via this little file attachment here, would it actually be able to read the whole book? And it depends. It depends on the size, because if it is outside the token limit for ChatGPT, it's not going to be able to read that. Additionally, if you are messaging with the AI back and forth, and you go over that token limit, which doesn't happen as much now as it used to be, but if you're using, say, the free version with ChatGPT 3.5, there is a decent chance you might run into this. All that means is it's going to start forgetting some of the first few messages that you had because it's losing that token limit memory. So that is the important thing to understand about tokens, is it's basically the memory of the AI, and it only has a limited amount of memory. If you keep going too far, it will eventually forget the things that you talked about in the beginning. But a lot of newer models have much bigger context windows, so it's not as big of an issue as it used to be. All right, now that we have covered the basics, let's get into some of the actual prompting techniques that you might use inside of ChatGPT. The first technique that I have for you is an acronym that I call FITS, F-I-T-S. And this acronym stands for formula, identity, task, and then style. Ideally, every prompt that you give the AI will have all 4 of these elements, although style is sometimes optional. But let's take a look at what this actually looks like. So I have here in my prompt library an example of a simple FITS prompt, which looks something like this. You are an advanced science fiction romance author with 20 years experience, and you have written 50 books. That right there is the identity part of the formula. Write me an outline for a science fiction beach romance. That's the task that in the FITS model, using the hero's journey model, which is the framework. And then we can also give it a style here in the structural style of a Jules Verne novel. So we give it that, the results that it's going to give us are going to be much better than if we just asked it to outline a science fiction beach romance novel. Now we could take this even further and start a new chat. I have, for example, another slightly more advanced prompt here. which looks something like this. You are an experienced and prolific fantasy fiction author who has published over 30 best-selling novels and has 40 years of experience. Your stories are known for vivid world building and morally complex characters. You have a PhD in mythology and Jungian psychology, which informs your symbolic writing style. All of that was part of the identity part of the formula. I'd like you to write 500 words of a scene using the following story summary, and that's the task. It's usually the simplest part of the formula. And then I give it the entire story summary here, which is the framework. That is the framework I'm providing. It's the overview of what I wanted to talk about. And then I say, do it in the first person past point of view of Lyra. Be sure to show, don't tell. You use deep point of view, have realistic dialogue, stronger verbs, etc., etc., etc. And that's all part of the style. And if I hit go on that, it's going to actually start giving me some prose here. So to break this down, the framework is basically the structure that you want it to adhere to. And it can be literally anything that you can think of. It can be a summary of the things that you want it to write. It can be a specific outline or template that you have developed. For instance, if you are doing some copywriting and you have copywriting templates for headlines, you can give those headline examples to ChatGPT as part of the framework. Then we have the identity. The identity is where you give it something that you want it to be an expert in. So in this case, it's an expert fantasy writer or an expert science fiction writer, but you could also put an expert copywriter or whatever it is that strikes your fancy, because what that ends up doing is it kind of narrows the focus of the AI to things that are going to be more consistent with experts in that field. And you do get better results from doing that. Then you give it the task. This is the most straightforward. It's just like write X, right? And that's really all it is. It's usually the simplest part of the format. And then you give it the style. Now, as I said, style can sometimes be optional. You don't necessarily need to have style if you are, for instance, just brainstorming story ideas or topics to write about, or your thesis statement or whatever it is. Style usually comes into play when you are actually getting into the writing portion of things where you want it to write in a particular way. But sometimes if you're just using AI for ideation and other things, you don't necessarily need it. So that is the FITS formula that I have for you today. The second big thing that I want to bring to your attention as far as prompting techniques go is what I call the fractal technique. The fractal technique is a very useful way of going from the germ of an idea to something that's much more fleshed out. And it's a multi-step process that allows us to kind of control the output that the AI gives us over those steps. So let's give you just a really brief example. If we wanted to create perhaps a book on food addiction, if we keep going with that, let's say I'd like to write a book on food addiction. Give me 20 ideas for the premise of this nonfiction book. And we can enhance this with the FITS prompting that we just learned, right? So we could say, you are an expert nonfiction writer, to give it that identity. And I kind of give it a formula already. I asked it to give me 20 ideas. So that's good. But we could enhance the formula a little bit. So we could say, make sure it's from a more personal point of view, like a memoir, which adds a few more restrictions, which enhances the creativity of the AI. Since we're only doing ideation at this point, we don't need to add a style, but that's all we need to do to just start generating ideas. And so now it's giving us a whole bunch of ideas, and some of these aren't too bad. They are slightly different from each other. The one that I like here is this year of transformation. So document a year in your life dedicated to overcoming food addiction, including the ups and downs and various strategies tried. So this is the very beginning of the fractal technique. And if you're familiar with fractals, it's one of those things that sort of grows more and more complex as you zoom into it. So we start kind of high level and then we sort of flesh it out and go from there. So let's say we wanted to drill further into this second idea. Well, we could say, I like number 2. Let's develop a full outline of that book. Let's start with a comprehensive list of all the chapters. And now it'll look at number 2 and start giving me a list of all of the potential chapters. Now, at this stage of the process, what you need to do is make sure that the human element is still present in this whole endeavor. Because if you don't do that, the end result is going to come off very artificial, lacking a little bit in soul, and lacking that sort of human touch of creativity. And so really what you need to look at the AI for is a suggestion box. It is giving you ideas, but it is your responsibility to take those and actually format it into something that's genuinely good. Think of it as a productivity tool, not a replacement for your writing. So what you would want to do with this outline is kind of take it, work with it a little bit, maybe ask the AI for some additional ideas to see if there's anything else that you might have missed until you have an outline that you're proud of. At that stage, it's time to start drilling a little bit deeper into the outline. Let's just assume you've done all that work and you've gone through and validated the results that the AI has given you. And let's say we want to actually dive into writing it. So we're expanding the fractal technique even further. So you could give it a prompt like, let's write the first a more detailed outline of chapter 1 introduction. Give me 20 bullet points of what this intro should cover. And as a quick side note, I misspelled the word what in this prompt, and that's okay. AI is actually really good at understanding what you meant based on the context of the entire sentence. And so now it has given us a comprehensive list of topics to cover in this specific chapter. Once again, you want to go ahead and validate all of this information. So go through and actually go through each step, make sure it's something that you actually do want to talk about, maybe infuse a little bit of your own ideas into the AI until you have a structural outline for this chapter that you are proud of. If we were writing fiction, we would call this the fiction beats process. And I'll give you a fiction example here in just a second. So let's say we wanted to actually start writing the actual prose. So we've drilled down quite a bit here. And let's say we'll give it, say 800 words based on the first 3 points. Now, you could also do this in a separate chat. So if you took your information here from the AI and you modified it and made it your own, you could copy, the first 3 sections here and then paste it in and say, write 800 words based on this. But since we are in the same chat, it can reference the previous material. And all I have to say is write 800 words based on the first 3 points. And it will go ahead and actually start the writing process. And here it goes. Hello and welcome to a journey that is deeply personal yet universally resonant. My name is Emma, and this is the story of my year-long battle with an ultimate mastery over food addiction. It's a journey not just through trials and tribulations of overcoming a profound challenge, but also an exploration of self, relationships, and the meaning of true nourishment. So this is the kind of thing that you're going to get out of ChatGPT. If you want this to be even higher quality, make sure you are going through the validation process, making sure it is covering all of the topics that you want it to cover, and be specific, because if the information is not here, then it will not end up in the final product. So let's say we wanted to do a fiction example. Additionally, you can get better results out of this by adding more of that style information that we talked about in the fits section. More style information will modify this to make it just sound a little bit better. So that's something you might want to be aware of. So if we want to do a fiction example here, here's how we could start that. First, we start with that ideation phase. Give me 10 ideas for a science fiction beach romance novel. And it gives me 10 ideas. I can ask for more, I could ask it to modify things, and I could also just modify the ideas myself. But in the interest of keeping things rather simple, we're just going to say, hey, I like option number 2. I like option 2. Please flesh out a full outline based on the hero's journey. And that moves us on to the next stage, which is the outline. You could also have an intermediate stage here. Sometimes people will flesh things out into, say, a 1-page synopsis and then create an outline for that. It all depends on your preference, but the point is to start small and just work your way into bigger and bigger and bigger. Once you have this outline, you would again go through the validation process where you go through, make sure it's everything that you want it to be, make sure the characters are who you want them to be. And that can sometimes take a little time if you're doing it right. But once you've done that process, you can then go into Act 1 and basically say, okay, write the first 800 words of this novel. And it goes ahead and starts writing it. So that is a very simple version of how the fractal techniques works. It will most of the time take a little longer because you want to spend time validating the stuff that it gives you to add your own human element. Otherwise, it's going to be very bland. Additionally, you might want to spend more work tweaking your style prompts and everything. But overall, that is the basics of the fractal technique. And it's usually the best technique to go from small idea to fully fleshed out work using AI. All right, the next prompting technique that I want to bring you through is called chain of thought prompting. This is the prompt where you basically split your prompts into multiple prompts, put simply, because sometimes the AI responds to things better if you basically give it more time to think. And so, for instance, I'll show you a bad example of what this looks like. You could just say, give me 20 headlines to sell a course on writing with ChatGPT. And it's going to give me 20 catchy headlines, like it says here. Unlock your creative potential. Learn to write with ChatGPT today. From novice to novelist, transform your writing skills with ChatGPT. All of which are kind of mediocre and not really headlines that I would expect to actually perform well when you start running ads to these headlines. And so a better way to do this would be to say, are you familiar with any high-performing copywriting headline templates? And it goes ahead and says, yes, it's familiar with several copywriting templates, and it gives me a list of templates. Another thing you could do is actually give it a framework of templates that you already know and you like, and say, analyze these headline templates for me, and it'll give you a basic analysis. Already, these examples that it's given me are better than the headlines it was giving me before. So I could say, now give me 10 headlines for a course about writing with ChatGPT that uses those 10 templates. How to master writing with ChatGPT in just 30 days. 7 key techniques to enhance your writing with ChatGPT. Struggling to write content quickly? Have you tried ChatGPT? Already these headlines are leaps and bounds better than the headlines we saw in the first example. So this is a good example of why giving it something to think about first will actually improve the response of your later prompting. And that's what chain of thought prompting is really all about. And this brings me to my next prompting technique, which is not so much a technique as it is just a way of interacting with the AI, and that is the idea that you need to have a conversation with it. So much of the best results I've gotten from AI have come after multiple rounds of just going back and forth with the AI, running ideas past the AI, having it ask me questions, etc., etc., etc. And sometimes after you've done that sort of complicated drilling down, it's able to give you something that is just a nugget of gold. And so as you're working with the AI, something I would encourage you to do is to pretend that you are Iron Man and ChatGPT is Jarvis. Literally go back and watch the first Iron Man movie and see how they interact, where Iron Man is asking questions, asking it to do little things for him while he does, all of his work in creating his suit or whatever it is he's working on. That is the kind of relationship we got to have with AI as a conversational partner that can kind of help you get out of your own head and your ideas and your writing down on paper. All right, the fifth prompting technique, which again is not so much a technique as just good writing advice with AI, and that is to be specific. I mentioned this already, but if you do not specify something that you have in mind, it's not going to end up in the final results. So if you have specific things that you want to get out of the AI or to be included in the writing that the AI gives you, you need to make sure it is specified in your prompt in some way, whether that is part of the framework that you give it, part of the style information that you give it, or whatever it is. AI tends to default to a very generic, very broad, and uninteresting way of writing. However, it is capable of doing so much more. Most of the criticism that I see of AI comes from people who are not actually exploring the prompting functionality of the AI. They'll just ask ChatGPT for an essay on something, and that's all the instruction they give it. Whereas if you use a fractal technique, for example, to say, give me a list of things that I should include in this essay, and then you sort of modify it, add your own human flair, maybe ask the AI for feedback on that outline, and then you feed that outline to it again and say, write an essay on this, that essay that you write is going to be miles better than if you just asked it for a generic essay. So be specific and make sure that everything you want to be included in the prompt is included. Otherwise, you're going to get generic and overly dull results. All right, the sixth prompt technique that I want to run by you is called negative prompting. This is actually more something that you want to avoid for the most part. AI is capable of recognizing negative prompting where needed, but this is the idea. For instance, if I go to you and I say, do not think about pink elephants, what are you thinking about? Probably pink elephants, right? If I go to a toddler and I say, you can't have cookies right now, even if the toddler wasn't thinking about cookies before, now they are thinking about cookies because you said the word cookies. Even though you said you can't have cookies right now, the toddler is thinking about cookies. The best technique with any toddler, as a father of one myself, is to just not bring it up. Hide the cookies. Do not mention cookies ever. Pretend that you don't have them. And that is the only way to keep the toddler from asking about them. And the same is largely true with AI, because if you mention something in your prompt, it's going to be thinking about it. And even if you say, don't do this thing, it will often include it anyway because it sort of forgot that you said don't do it. Now, that said, I have sometimes gotten better results by saying don't do this or don't include this word. So it is sometimes capable of doing that, but just understand you are running a risk and you might want to test with and without and focus primarily on positive prompting, saying do this, do that, instead of saying don't do this, don't do that. This is one of those things that I'm pretty sure as AI models get better and better, that the models will not really have as much of an issue with this problem at the moment, but I'd say to be safe, try to avoid negative prompting when you're using ChatGPT. All right, let's talk a little bit about style prompting because as I mentioned in the FITS formula, style is a useful part of any good prompt, especially if you are getting to the actual writing part of using ChatGPT. So I'm going to show you a sample style prompt. And this is a style prompt that I often use on the back end for some of my writing, especially if I'm writing fiction. So I've gone back to that fiction example we were using, and I'm just going to say, rewrite that, but use the following style information. And some of the things we can do here is give it a point of view. So if you look at the text that it gave us here, it says Lena Harris adjusted the straps of her anti-static wristband, her fingers trembling slightly. It's written in third person point of view. So I want to change that to first person. I want the viewpoint character to be Lena. I want the tense to be present tense. This is a little bit less common in fiction, but it's more and more common these days. The Hunger Games, for example. And then I give it a whole bunch of things: fast-paced action and snappy dialogue, grounded realism, tight and punchy sentences with descriptive language, quick dialogue with short quips and comebacks, show don't tell. And I basically go on and on with a whole bunch of different advice. This is something that I have inside of my prompt library, but it's the sort of thing that you could also develop yourself. Over time, as you read what AI gives you, you're going to notice certain trends that might not be things that you like. And so as you see those trends, all you have to do is go into your style prompt and find a way to, in a way that's not negative, constructively steer it in a different direction. And as you do that, you're going to get a much better result from what the AI gives you. So in this case, we're having it go. And you can tell already from the first word that it is writing in first person. I strap on my anti-static wristband, the snug click steadying my jittering hands. Not nerves, but a cocktail of thrill and apprehension swirling inside me. And so it's already basically rewriting it with this style in mind. My fingers hovers over the launch button, heart hammering, I press it, lights flicker, power surges, and the lab roars to life, then silence. So already a much better style overall. Still a little bit overly flowery, but that's more of an issue with the model itself and less easy to do using style prompts themselves. If I really wanted to take this in a totally different direction, we could give it a wildly different style prompt, and I could say something like, now write it in the style of H.P. Lovecraft, who is my favorite to use for an example just because of the odd way that he wrote. I affixed the anti-static wristband with trembling fingers, not from any mundane trepidation, but rather from a profound sense of cosmic foreboding. And you can see how different this is just from that one style prompt change. Now at this point, you've probably seen me reference my prompt library a couple of times. It's where I got this style prompt and a couple of my other prompts. If you want to get your hands on this prompt library, you can do so absolutely for free. It is available on my website, which I will link to down below. All you need to do is sign up for my email newsletter, and you will get not only this prompt library, but you will get a fiction outline that I developed that tells you exactly what should happen in a 40-chapter book, and you will get a small course going through a lot of these techniques in a little bit more depth so you can understand how to incorporate them into your own writing. So if that is interesting to you and you want to get your hands on all of these prompts that I'm using, as well as other prompts as I use them inside of other videos, definitely go check this out and I will see you there. So we've covered a lot of prompting techniques, and we could go a little bit deeper on all of the different ways to prompt, but I want to keep this a somewhat manageable video. And so we're not going to do that. Most of what you would need to do with AI can be done with all of the prompting techniques that I've shown you. But I'd like to go deeper into what specifically we can do with ChatGPT that may or may not be available in other programs. So let's dive deeper into some of the specific use cases for ChatGPT. The first thing I want to go over with you is called custom instructions. And this is a really useful thing to know, especially after our conversation just now about the style. So if you come down here to your name and then you select customize ChatGPT, you have the option of inserting a nuggets of information that you want the AI to kind of remember all the time. All you have to do, make sure, first of all, that this enable for new chats section is enabled. And then if you want, you can take your style prompt that you gave it and add it right here under how would you like ChatGPT to respond. And you can put that information right there. Additionally, you can add information about yourself. I don't use this field quite as much, but if you want to say, hey, I am a writer, I specialize in this and that, and this is my company, this is what my company does, or whatever you want it to know, you can put more information about that here just so it has that context. But mostly I'm concerned about how the AI is going to respond. And so I might put some of the style information here so that now if I save this, it will remember that style information to the point where anything I write will use that. The only thing you need to be careful of here is it is now enabled for every chat that you are using it for. So basically every new chat is going to be using that style information. So you need to be careful. If you want it to respond in a different way, you have to come back to this custom instructions section and then turn off the enable for new chats and then save it once more to kind of remove that default. Another thing that you can do inside ChatGPT that's really handy is you can share your chats. So from any of your chats, you can come up here to the top right-hand corner and select this little button to share. All you have to do here is select copy link, and it'll copy this, and now you can give it to someone so they can see the results. They're not going to be able to actually continue the chat themselves unless you're on like a team plan and you're all within the same team, but at least someone can take that chat and view it and give you feedback, whatever it is that you need with that. The next thing I want to cover is GPTs. Now I'm going to go a lot more in depth on how to create and use a GPT towards the end of this video, but let's take a look at, for instance, this GPT that I created called Dictation Machine. I can come in here and basically use this technique, which the function of this specific GPT is to give it text that I dictated that might have a few errors in it because it was dictated text, and it will clean up that text for me. So all I have to do is just paste in the text and it automatically knows that it needs to clean it up for dictation. I don't have to explain in my prompt every time that this is a dictated piece of text and please clean it up for me. All I have to do is just paste the text and it's done. But one thing that is interesting about these is that you can actually call a GPT into a separate chat. So the way that you do this is if you are typing away, all you have to do is hit the @ button, and it will give you a list of your GPTs that you have been using recently. You can also just create a new one. And I can just go ahead and click on dictation machine. And now it's talking to the dictation machine and bringing in the use case of that specific GPT. So if you have a lot of different GPTs that you use for different reasons, and you want to actually bring one into a chat that you've already started, you can absolutely do that right here. I also want to make one note. There used to be this thing inside of ChatGPT. You might hear people talk about it if you go look at older videos on the subject, called plugins. Basically, a plugin was a way to add an additional layer of functionality to the AI, but it has been almost entirely replaced by what GPTs have become since. So if you hear anything about plugins, just don't worry about that. They've been discontinued and you can just use GPTs instead. All right, the next major function of ChatGPT that I want to make sure we talk about is using DALL-E. DALL-E is the image generator inside of ChatGPT that you can use. So for instance, we've talked a little bit about this science fiction beach romance novel that we've done. If I wanted to create concept art for that, I could say, give me a concept art shot for a sci-fi beach romance that could be used on the book's cover. And it starts automatically accessing DALL-E to actually go through and generate this image. And it's given us a really interesting and actually not too bad image here of a robot and a woman. Now, I don't know what kind of book we would have with a robot and a woman on a beach in a romance. I'm sure there are plenty of books like that. We have this cool sci-fi looking city, and just the vibrance of the whole thing is really great. And the great thing about DALL-E is that you can kind of continue the chat as you could with text. So let's say I didn't want a robot. Let's say I want the man to be a merman instead of a robot. It will take that advice and go through and try to create something very similar to the first image, but making the modifications that I asked it to make. And okay, so this one is maybe a good example of how the AI art can sometimes be a little strange, because this man is now walking on the beach with the woman, but you can just tell that overall it's a very similar layout. The coloring is very similar. So what if we wanted to even add text? DALL-E 3 is one of those rare AI art generators that can, to a certain extent, do some text. It's not always going to get it right, but if you continue to rerun the prompt, you can do that. So let's say now add some text to make this a full sci-fi beach romance book cover. The title should be, and then I'm going to put this in quotes, Love of the Skies. And you know, it might not be the most appropriate title for a merman. We're just going to see how well it does. And here we go. And it even changed it to be actually look like a book cover. And it changed some things. You know, now the woman is the mer person and not the man. That's probably because in a lot of the art that it would have looked at, there would be more mermaids than mermen. But this is a really cool looking cover. And most importantly, it got the text right, Love of the Skies. And it did a really good job of making this look like a good cover. Now, while this specific image would not really work well for the actual cover of the book, this is the kind of thing that you might want to give to a designer to say, hey, I want something just like this. And they'll be able to do a much better job because they have a much better idea of your vision. In addition, you could create concept art. You could do all sorts of things with DALL-E. There's logo generation, all kinds of things that you can do with DALL-E that I'm only just barely scratching the surface of here. But the things I wanted to get across is that you can create something and then you can modify it and kind of go back and forth with the AI just like you can with text. All right, another thing that you can do with ChatGPT is it actually has a vision capability, meaning it can look at an image that you give it and comment on it and be able to understand some of it. So for example, I have this image of a traditional English breakfast that we can take a look at and we can see exactly what it's capable of doing here. So the way to access the vision is to go to this attachment, make sure you grab the image that you want it to attach, and then give it a prompt on what you want it to do with this image. So I'm just going to give it a simple prompt of describe this image in detail. And sure enough, it says the image features a hearty, full English breakfast. On a round plate, there are 2 sunny side-up eggs with bright yellow yolks. Next to the eggs, there is a generous portion of bacon with a crispy texture. A trio of grilled sausages appears to be juicy and well browned. Accompanying these are a pair of grilled tomato halves showcasing a charred exterior and a moist interior. Baked beans with a tomato-based sauce are piled neatly onto the plate. Black pudding slices, which are dark and thick, add to the variety of the meal. Sauteed mushrooms. It basically got everything right here as far as what is on the table. So let's say you wanted to actually create this. So you could then from there go say, how do I recreate this breakfast? Give me a recipe and a shopping list. And it says to create the classic full English breakfast, you'll need a recipe and a shopping list. And here it gives us the shopping list. We have eggs, thick cut bacon, sausages, tomatoes, canned baked beans. Gives us even some optional things here, like some brown sauce or ketchup and some tea and coffee. And here it gives us the recipe as well on how to actually create all of these things. So it's a really handy feature to be able to actually view things. I actually have a personal experience using this where I was out with my daughter and she saw this one really tall plant and she was like, what's that? And she kept asking me every time we would pass it on our walks. She'd be like, what's that? What's that? And I really didn't know. So I literally took a picture of it with the ChatGPT app on my phone and asked ChatGPT what it was. It gave me the answer and it was correct. So this is a very useful feature, especially if you're out and about and you have the ChatGPT app on your phone. It can be a really useful tool to have. Additionally, ChatGPT has a voice feature where it can actually read aloud what it has chatted to you. And this is a really useful feature here. So all you have to do is select this.
To recreate this classic full English breakfast, you'll need a recipe and a shopping list for the ingredients. Below is a simple guide to help you prepare this dish. Shopping list: eggs, 2 per serving. Thick cut bacon, 2 to 3 slices per serving.
And that's just another really interesting way of interacting with the AI, especially if you have accessibility issues and you want it to read things aloud. It can be a really good tool. I'm just waiting for the day where we can have all of this incorporated into your Alexa or your Google Home and just be able to chat back and forth with the AI in that way, further bringing that idea of Iron Man and Jarvis into our real world. All right, we've now covered the basics, some prompting techniques, and all of the ChatGPT specific features that you will find inside of the subscription. But let's actually talk about some actual use cases that you might want to use ChatGPT for. Now, some of these I've already alluded to here and there, so we might skip over them a little bit briefly, but the first one I want to spend a little time on because it is perhaps where ChatGPT and other AI bots are most helpful, and that is with ideation or brainstorming. Now, the tip with brainstorming or any kind of ideation is you want to ask for multiple options. So, for example, you might want to write something like, you are an expert publisher. Give me 20 ideas for a title to my book on food addiction. And you can use ideation for literally anything. If you are stuck in your story or writing your nonfiction book or you're writing an article and you don't know what should happen next, AI is one of the best ways to do that. You can use it for titles, subtitles, ad copy, anything that you can think of where you want to generate ideas because you're sort of stuck in that writer's block. You can absolutely do that with ChatGPT. And we actually have some decent titles here. I like Hungry Hearts. That's interesting. Breaking the Chains. And you might not necessarily use any of these, but what I have found is that by just asking it for ideas, you will see it and say, oh, well, maybe not quite like that, but it actually somehow kickstarts your own creativity. And I've heard this from a lot of different authors that are using ChatGPT and other AI tools. You would think that the AI is sort of replacing creativity, but from what I've heard, a lot of people, myself included, find that it enhances enhances the creativity. It makes you more creative because it sort of gets you over that wall, that writer's block. You can even give it a summary of your book so far and say, I don't know where to take this next. Give me 10 ideas for where to go next. The reason that we want to have it give you multiple ideas is because if you just ask it for an idea, it will give you probably the most obvious, the most generic idea that it can think of, and it's not going to be very good. But when you ask for multiple ideas, it's sort of forced to think deeper, and that's the kind of thing that you want to do. You can even ask follow-up questions. So for instance, in this particular case, I could say, I like Hungry Hearts, but let's try a different subtitle. Give me 20 options. And if you really want to push it a little bit further to get it to be more creative, you can give it a slight restriction. This is part of that framework of the FITS model, right? It's giving it little restrictions to work it under. So we could say, give me 20 options that include the word healing or something like that. And now it's going to give me variations of that Hungry Hearts thing that all include the word healing. So that is one of the more powerful ways in which you can utilize ChatGPT. It's through ideation and brainstorming. You can basically get unstuck. There is no excuse for writer's block anymore when you have AI, because all you have to do is feed your problem into the AI, figure out where you're stuck, and it will give you options. And even if those options aren't good, for some reason, it breaks you past that barrier and suddenly you're able to keep going. All right, another thing that AI and ChatGPT in particular is really good at is summarization. Now, I'm not an expert on the actual tech behind machine learning, but I do know that summarization is one of those things, just because of the way it works and the way it processes language, it's actually really good at doing. And so what I'm going to demonstrate for you today, let's create a new chat. I'm going to go to a video of mine, and I use this Chrome plugin called Transcript and Summary for YouTube. And so this just allows me to quickly copy the transcript here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. This is the transcript for this particular video. And I could say summarize this video. And you can do this for any YouTube video, any long article. The only thing you have to keep in mind is the token limit that ChatGPT might have. So if you're asking it to summarize something that is maybe thousands and thousands of words long, it won't be able to handle that. But if you're just doing like a transcript of a video or a single online article, it should most of the time be able to handle that. So I added this entire transcript in here. And now it is going ahead and actually summarizing the video pretty well. And this in particular is a pretty lengthy and detailed summary, obviously far shorter than the actual transcript. But let's say we wanted it even smaller. So let's say, try again and summarize it in one sentence. The video demonstrates how to use Novel Crafter, traditionally a fiction writing tool for long-form nonfiction, by customizing prompts, incorporating research, and editing AI-generated text to align with the author's style and content needs. And that is a beautiful one-sentence summary of what my video in this case is about. And this could be really useful if you're doing any kind of like research project. You really just need to condense something into a short amount of time. If you have a website and you want to link to a specific article or create a meta description for your article or an excerpt or something like that to entice people to click, summarizing things up in a one sentence summary here can be really useful to just give you that quick little introduction to the article or video that you have created. There are all kinds of different use cases for summarization, but safe to say ChatGPT is amazing at it. All right, the next thing that ChatGPT can help you with is fiction. Now, we've already covered this a little bit earlier in the video where I showed you how to incorporate style information and go using the fractal technique, going from brainstorming to outline to finished prose. And ChatGPT can definitely help you get that first draft down on paper. Now, I have found that it's not the best at the actual quality of the prose that it gives you, but everything else before you get to the prose is something it's really good at. It's good at coming up with outlines. It's good at anything that's sort of structural. Like if you give it a template, this is the kind of story I want with this template. It's really good at sort of taking that and matching what your intentions are and what you're asking it to do. And even with a little little bit of work, you can get the prose to be a little bit better. There are better ways to write fiction, I believe, with AI, and I'll get into some of those at the very end of the video. But overall, it's a very powerful tool. It's a good way of working with the AI on every step of the fiction writing process, because one of the things that people don't really realize is that writing fiction, it's not just one thing. It is a multi-step process that involves ideation, outlining, plotting, character development, world building. A lot of people have a step along that journey that is their favorite. Maybe they really love the writing process itself and they don't want to give that up. And if that's the case, absolutely, that's fine. You can actually just write the stuff yourself, but maybe you hate world building and you want to add in a couple of details and you don't want to just have to spend hours and hours brainstorming about it. And so you can use ChatGPT to fill in there. My advice when writing fiction or nonfiction is to lean into your strengths and then allow the AI to make up for your weaknesses. And as I've already mentioned before, with the ideation section, writer's block is really not an issue anymore. I think that every author, regardless of whether you actually use the AI or not in your writing, should be at least using AI for ideation. And I'm pretty sure as this technology develops and gets more heavily integrated into our day-to-day lives, that this will eventually become the case. We'll have a version of Jarvis just in our phone or in our Alexa, and we'll just be able to talk back and forth with this AI, which will basically give you everything you need to be able to get unstuck in any sort of process of your writing. Everything I just said about fiction also applies to nonfiction. So I already gave you this example of a book on food addiction, where it can help you come up with ideas of what the chapters should be about. Also going through the fractal technique of starting with a small idea, getting all of your ideas down for larger synopsis or outline of the book, and then actually moving into writing the prose. Everything I said about fiction applies to nonfiction as well. The only major difference is that nonfiction is dealing more with factual information. And so you got to keep in mind that it might hallucinate over some things. It might give you things that are wrong. And so you always want to fact check what it gives you or provide the facts yourself. You can take all of the research you might have, give it to the AI, and it can help you work with that data in a way that makes sense. But overall, my process for writing nonfiction is very similar to my process for writing fiction. The only major difference is instead of an outline that follows like a specific story template, usually my outlining of nonfiction is really closer to an ideation session with the AI to figure out what are all the topics that I want to cover inside of this book that are related to this broader topic. And so as you can see here, for this food addiction book example, it gave me a whole lot of ideas of the types of things that you would find in a book on food addiction. And so it would then be my job to go through and cherry pick all of the ones that I actually wanted to use and maybe ask it for more ideas, or maybe throughout that process, I will get my own ideas and add those in and then create the outline that way. And then move into the actual prose writing section if you are the kind of person that wants to use AI for prose. Once again, I find that ChatGPT is maybe a little stilted when it comes to the actual quality of the prose. It's a little purple, meaning it's overly flowery. And I'll give you some recommendations at the end of this video for some better options if you want to use AI to write the actual prose of a book. But that said, everything up until that prose writing section it's very good at. It's really good at ideation, coming up with ideas, coming up with outlines, working under a structure and restraints that you give it. And so if that's what you need AI for, then ChatGPT is absolutely your friend. All right, let's talk about another use case where you can get some good value out of ChatGPT, and that is editing. Now, editing is a tricky subject when it comes to AI because very often there's no one clear answer of what should be edited and what shouldn't. And so if you are asking AI for ideas on what you should change, sometimes it will give you good advice, but often because of the way AI works, it will give you advice that sounds nice, but isn't necessarily good advice. And that is just due to the fact that AI is basically a word predictor on steroids. It's the same technology that you have in your phone when it's predicting what word you want to write next in your text. And so I don't actually use AI very often for editing purposes, although you certainly can if you want. There is one thing that ChatGPT in particular is not bad at, and that is actually acting as a proofreader, because there are some harder, more defined rules around grammar and spelling and so forth that AI is capable of catching. So let's go ahead. Let's take a paragraph here from this example that it gave us, We're going to go into a new thing and paste it in here. And I'm going to put in some intentional grammar and spelling mistakes. So let's just, make a couple of spelling mistakes here. And maybe we can add an extra comma here. Maybe we can remove the comma on this one right here. And now we've given it basically some issues. Maybe instead of a period here, we'll have a question mark where it shouldn't be a question mark. And so now what we can do is, before this paragraph, say, please revise this paragraph to correct all grammar and spelling errors. So let's make sure that it got everything correct. So it got universally correct. It replaced that comma that we took away. It got rid of the extra comma, and it got rid of the unnecessary question mark. So this is one thing that ChatGPT is actually really good at. And usually if you give it some text and ask it to correct the grammar and spelling, it will get it right. However, there's one big caveat here, and that is that you shouldn't do it for extra long pieces of text. And the reason for that is because AI can't necessarily handle longer pieces of text, and the longer it goes, the more likely it is that it's going to stray from what you gave it. And so I would not do more than a couple paragraphs, certainly no more than 300 or 400 words. And even if you do that, you want to make sure you read through it and make sure it's the same thing that you wrote, because sometimes AI, just from the nature of how it works, will get distracted and start writing when you don't want it to write. You just want it to change the grammatical structure. Additionally, even though this is pretty good at catching spelling and grammar errors, there may be larger, more structural issues with your writing. Say, like you might have a run-on sentence, or you're using passive voice, or too many adverbs or something like that. And AI is not quite as adept catching those or properly correcting them as you, the human, might be. So if you're only using it for spelling and grammar, ChatGPT is a great resource for that. If you need it for more structural line editing type of editing, then what I would do instead is ask for suggestions around passive voice, adverbs, whatever it is that you're running into, and it will give you a much better suggestion of what you might want to change. But you still need to have some kind of human input to be able to say yes or no to those suggestions. Because if you just allow it to change things for you, chances are it's not actually going to make it better. All right, the next use case that I want to talk about here is academic writing. So first of all, let me just start with a caveat on this. And that is that sometimes the purpose of academic writing is to teach you how to write. And if that's the case, then you should absolutely not use ChatGPT. It's for the same reason that if I was trying to learn how to spell, if I was in a spelling bee, I'm not going to be using a spell checker, even though that technology has been around for years now, because it sort of defeats the principle of learning. Additionally, there are times when I was learning math where I wouldn't use a calculator, because while a calculator can absolutely do those things, it's not about that. It's about learning how to do the math. And then later in life, you can use the calculator to save you time and things, but you've learned the basic principles of how math works. This is very important for writing. And the reason I say that is because I've read so many things from people that wrote fiction, nonfiction, research papers, whatever it is, with AI, and I can read it and immediately tell that it was written with AI, because there are things that AI is just simply not good at that it requires a human to do. And if you as a human are not advanced enough to be able to spot those things in the writing and know that that is bad writing, then you are going to have an issue. Now, as AI gets better and better, I'm sure this will be harder to do, but I do encourage you to actually learn the principles of writing, which is something that I teach inside of my membership, so that you will be better able to use the AI as a foundation and then enhance it with your own creativity and your own skill, so that you are thereby using the AI as a productivity tool like it should be, instead of just replacing you. Because if you're allowing it to just replace you, you might get better writing than what you would be able to do previously, but it's not going to actually be on the level of a pro. And so absolutely, you should spend some time working without AI just to learn the principles of good writing, even if you plan on using AI heavily in the future in general. I'll just say that for me personally, I always have at least one project that I'm working on without AI, specifically to keep those skills that I have sharp. And I recommend that most people do that. But all of that said, AI can definitely help you in academic writing. Where I think it will help the best is to help you with your argument. Now, going back to when I was an English major in college, one of the things that we talked about a lot was having a thesis statement and then supporting arguments for that thesis statement. So if you want to use AI as, say, a brainstorming partner, a good idea would be to use it to help you find what your thesis statement should be. Maybe you're unsure. So you could say, give me 10 ideas for a thesis statement in an academic paper about food addiction. And here it will give you a couple of different thesis statements. And then from there, you'd want to go through these and figure out which ones you like the best, which one you actually want to use. So let's say we just want to use this first one. So we'll say, let's use this first one. Give me let's give it 5 arguments that support this thesis statement, and how I could incorporate them into my academic paper. And here it goes into the different arguments, and you can take those arguments and incorporate them into your academic paper. Ideally, I think at this point you would want to write the thing yourself, but if you're just stuck on the idea phase of things and you don't know what your argument should be, this is a great way to get around that. All right, the next use case that I have is to write emails. Now, emails can be about anything, and you want to make sure that you are avoiding that overly flowery purple prose that AI sometimes gives you. And so it might require a little bit of editing on your part, but sometimes just coming up with that first draft of an email you want to send out is just really difficult. So you can just ask it a question. I need to write an email about this. Can you give me a first draft? Make it friendly, make it simple, whatever you want to do to add this to the style. If you write emails to a mass audience, something that I like to do is repurpose content for email. So let's go back to this video and copy this transcript again. And this is something that I do sometimes. We'll say, turn the following video transcript into an email for my audience of authors. And then I just paste in the transcript there. And it starts to write the email for me. And because it's familiar with good email formatting, it does things like adding a bulleted list here to sort of break it up. It's usually pretty tight paragraphs and things like that. Again, the prose tends to be a little bit overly flowery in things, and so you want to be careful with that. But if you're just looking for something to get you started and to get your ideas flowing, this is a great way to help you write those emails. All right, going along with that, AI is a really good tool for writing ad and headline copy. So if we stay inside of this particular chat and ask it, and I've already sort of demonstrated this for you, but you could say something like, what are some good copywriting templates for email headlines? And here it will give you some templates that are really good, generally accepted copywriting templates. Copywriting is a very formulaic art. And so because ChatGPT works so well with formulas, this is a great way to sort of get you started, asking it for those formulas, and then say, write a headline for the email above that fits these templates. And here it gives me a bunch of actually pretty decent headlines that I could use for this email. Again, you don't necessarily have to use these, but they can get your juices flowing. There might be a word or a phrase in there that you actually really like. And so you could plug that in and there you go. All of this actually kind of shows you another use case of AI and using ChatGPT, and that is repurposing content. So I've already given it this video transcript that I have, and I'm already repurposing it for email, but you can repurpose content in so many ways. one of the good ways to kind of get the most out of your marketing is to have a sort of flagship content marketing, like say a blog post or a video. And then you take that and sort of divide it up into little pieces and create social media content around that. So let's just say, now give me 10 captions for Instagram posts that are about the same subject. The subject being my video that we gave it earlier. And it gives you a whole bunch of captions that you can use on Instagram, and you just add some images there. Perhaps even use ChatGPT's image generator to help you generate some of these images. And in fact, let's see what we could do there. So generate an image that could go with number 1. So number 1, as if you read it here, is unleash the power of AI to bring my nonfiction stories to life. And so we're going to see how creative it is in coming up with something that will fit that particular caption. And, you know, it gave us actually pretty decent thing here. I'm sure if we read the text on this laptop, it would all be gibberish, but it does actually fit the right mood, the right tone that you would want for a writer who is interested in writing nonfiction. You've got books, you've got coffee, like it all sort of fits the right vibe here. So this is a great way to create social media content. In addition to social media content, you can use this for emails, as I've already demonstrated, short form video, advertisements, and more. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of all of the different use cases that you can use AI for in your writing. But let's talk about one thing that I've kind of neglected up to this point, and that is GPTs. So GPTs are one of those features of ChatGPT that are really unique, and I'm actually surprised that more companies haven't done something very similar, because it actually does kind of make the whole process a little bit easier, especially if you use AI repetitively for a particular task. So if you find yourself copying and pasting the same prompt over and over and over again, and you just want to make it a little bit easier, that might be a good signal that you want to use a GPT. So let's discuss a little bit of what GPTs are. First of all, if you go here on the left-hand side, you'll see a spot where it says Explore GPTs. Go ahead and click on that. And it gives you a whole bunch of different GPTs that you can play around with. Some of these are a little more advanced and usually involve connecting with an API or something. And so some of these big companies, like you can see Canva here has a GPT, they're able to get some more advanced features because of that integration between Canva and between ChatGPT. So if you wanted to try that out, you could. But I have actually found that in practice, the most valuable GPTs are the ones that I create myself to automate a specific prompt that I do frequently. One I've already alluded to, it's my dictation cleaner upper, where I just pop in a piece of text that I dictated, which has a lot of dictation errors. So a lot of homophones and things that it might have just gotten wrong or just got the words wrong. And AI is really good at understanding the context of a word. And so is able to sort of fix that, correctly judges to be what I meant to say. Now, if I didn't have this GPT, every time I put in a piece of text, I would have to say, rewrite this text to fix all of the dictation things that could go wrong. And then I have a list of like homophones and misspelled words and words that meant this when it really meant, you know, and I have this big long prompt for it. And that, even though it sounds like kind of a first world problem, it does get tedious over time to be copying and pasting that prompt over and over and over again every time that I want to clean up dictated text. So an easier way to do this is to create a GPT. And that GPT basically acts as an automated prompt engine. So the prompt is sort of pre-installed, you could say, inside of the GPT, so that I don't need to run the prompt anymore. All I have to do is copy the dictated text into this dictation cleaner upper, and it will automatically just clean up the text without me having to prompt any more. And this is the type of GPT that I found to work the best, is the kind that you create for yourself to automate a specific process. And so we're going to go a little bit into how to create a GPT. There are 2 ways to do it, one of which is really geared for someone who has no idea what they're doing, so anybody can create a GPT, and one that's a little bit more intermediate, which is where I usually recommend people go. So let's go ahead and create a GPT. Once again, you want to go here to Explore GPTs and come to this GPT section. And then over here in the top right corner, you'll see it says Create. Go ahead and click on that. And then it will actually have a ChatGPT bot here interacting with you, asking you what you want to do to create a GPT. So let's say we want to recreate this dictation GPT. So we say, I want to create a GPT that fixes text that was dictated by a human. And you give it that, and it will do a little bit of thinking. And it'll give you suggestions on what to name the GPT. It'll give you, for instance, this one says dictation editor, which I think that's fine. So I'll just go ahead and tell it that that's fine. And it gives you a image generated with DALL-E that it thinks is appropriate for the dictation editor. And I'll just say that's good too. Or you can also ask it to redo it and give it some instruction. Like you say, maybe I don't want a feather here. Maybe I want a microphone, whatever it is that you want. And then it asks you more questions. So it says, now let's refine how dictation editor works. What kind of text errors should it focus on fixing? For example, should it prioritize grammar, punctuation, or maybe adapting informal speech to a more formal tone? And so I would say something along the lines of, I need it to prioritize grammar and punctuation, as well as identifying speech pattern, potential pitfalls of dictation, such as incorrect homophones, words that sound similar but are incorrect, etc. So if you really don't know how to optimize a GPT, this is a great way to go, where it asks you questions and you figure things out. And already just with that, it says it's all set up, and it'll ask you to try it out by providing some text to edit. We're not going to do that right now, but you can also test it here to preview and see if it's working. And if it's not working, you can go back over here and say, let's tweak this, and go from there. And then you would just come up here and hit create, and you can specify whether you want it to be only accessible to yourself, or if anyone can with a link can use it, or even publish it to the GPT store. As of right now, there is a small amount of compensation, I believe, if people are using your GPT frequently. However, from what I understand, the GPT store isn't all it's cracked up to be, really. And if you're looking to make a lot of money from GPTs, chances are you're not going to do it, because it's just so easy for people to set up their own that it's very rare that somebody else would set up a GPT that you want to use. And so I think most people are not actually using a whole lot of GPTs, and there are going to be very few GPTs that actually earn a lot of money. So usually I just set this up for only me, unless it's something I want to publish specifically to my nerdy novelist community or something like that. Now, I want to show you a different way to create these GPTs that, in my mind, is actually a little bit better, because you have more control over what the GPT does. And so we're going to go back here and hit create again. And instead of running through this chat here with GPT to try and figure out what it is that you need, I'm going to instead go to this tab that says configure. And so here you can manually type everything in. Let's say this is a GPT that we want to take large pieces of information and summarize it in one sentence, just like we did before. I actually had a use case where, for a particular project I was working on, I was doing a lot of that. I was taking like long articles and I needed to summarize it in one sentence. And I got tired of just prompting it every time to say, summarize this in one sentence, summarize this in one sentence. And so what I did instead is I created a GPT to allow me to just paste the text in there, and then it automatically knew it needed to summarize it in one sentence. So let's say we'll call this one sentence summarizer. You can add a description if you want, but this isn't necessary. What you need to worry about here is the instructions section. So this is a very simple GPT that we're setting up here, but basically all I need to do is say something like, when given text, summarize it in one sentence only. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Now, you can also add some conversation starters. So these are the kind of things that you might see pop up above the chat window right around in this section, where it gives you prompts on how to start. I don't think that's really something that I need for this particular GPT, and it's really only something I would do if I had any plans of publishing this GPT for other people. You can also add knowledge. So this is one of the more powerful use cases of GPTs is if you have a whole lot of background info that you want it to know, you can upload files here. Now, because of the way these files are accessed, it's a different form of processing that we call RAG processing. And RAG is really good for information retrieval. So if you put in there, say, a list of dates and things that happened on those dates, and then you ask the GPT, what happened on September 1st, 1920, whatever, it will be able to retrieve that information pretty readily. What it's not good at is things like, for instance, style, or if you are creating fiction, for example, put an entire summary of your outline and everything into there. It's not necessarily going to be including that every time you use it. It's not going to have it as good context. Now, if you ask it specifically to retrieve a piece of information that was in that, then it can do that. But if you just say, like, I want you to know all of these characters, and so you put in a document here in the knowledge section with all of your characters, it's not necessarily going to always remember those characters for every time you're prompting, just from the way RAG prompting works. So keep that in mind. It's really good for information retrieval if it needs to be able to retrieve certain information. So any kind of spreadsheet and SOPs or whatever you want to put in here, it can be useful. You can also add different capabilities like web browsing, DALL-E image creation, and code interpreter, which is the more advanced data analytics. For this specific GPT, since it's a very simple GPT, I don't need any of those, so I'm going to just keep them unchecked. And then actions, this is really more for larger companies that have software that wants to integrate with this GPT in some way. So if you have a software product with an API, you can add that API here. It's really more of an advanced technique that most people don't need to worry about. And so I'm not going to worry about it here. Already though, even though this is all we've given our GPT, this one little prompt, when given text, summarize it in one sentence only, this alone will save you a whole lot of time if you need to summarize a lot of things in one sentence. And so we're going to go ahead and test this. Once again, let's grab this large transcript that we have here and paste it in. Remember, I'm not adding a prompt. I'm just pasting in the text. And it gives us the one sentence summary. The video explains how to use Novel Crafter for writing long form nonfiction, highlighting necessary adjustments and tools within the software to effectively integrate AI for crafting a nonfiction book. And boom, there we have it. So that is the magic of using GPTs. It's really best for taking little processes that you might use it frequently for and automating that process so it takes just a little bit of work off your plate. It's really good for data entry and that kind of thing where you're doing single repetitive tasks over and over again. Now, after all of that, let me just explain one thing, because I actually don't use ChatGPT too frequently anymore, because as a writer, I find it's not very good at writing. There are many things that ChatGPT is amazing at, particularly anything to do with structure, anything to do with summarization, or the kind of quick repetitive tasks that we've sort of discussed all so far. It's really good for editing spelling and grammar and dictation, so I do use it for those things. But the models inside of ChatGPT are not really good at natural sounding text. As I've mentioned a couple of times, it's overly flowery, usually not very realistic. And while this is a common problem for AI in general, there are some models out there that do a lot better. My favorite at the moment is the Claude 3 family of models as of this recording. Now, I have no doubt that when GPT-5 comes out and that gets integrated with ChatGPT, that it will be miles above what the GPT-4 model and GPT 3.5 model can do right now. So I'm not saying that we should just disregard ChatGPT entirely, but there are a few better options at this point in time. And so I recommend you check this video out that I have all about why you shouldn't use ChatGPT and what you should use instead. And I will see you in that video.